Hello, Marvelites. I am Angélique Roché, and I am so excited to welcome you to an inside look on Marvel's upcoming anthology, Marvel's Voices Legacy #1. And Marvel's Voices is a comic book, but it's so much more than just that. There are the characters we love, and there are some immensely talented Black creators behind the stories and art. We've been hard at work putting this book together, and we can't wait to share this exclusive look with you all. So to help me do that, I am joined not by one, not two, but three of the incredible writers who are part of Marvel's Voices Legacy #1, Danny Lore, Stephanie Williams, and Tochi Onyebuchi. Welcome, y'all! So all of you are wordsmiths, so I'm gonna keep this short and just give a quick introduction. For each one of you, can you tell the folks at home what your story is about in one sentence or less? I know this is a lot. We will start off with Tochi.
So, one night in Madripoor, Domino has a pretty interesting card game.
All right, that sums it up pretty well. Stephanie.
Monica Rambeau's mom needs to run errands, and she drags along her and some Avengers.
All right, Danny.
I actually have two stories. I have a Blade story in which a couple of kids get some help at the bodega. And then the Storm story, which is about Storm helping a young girl who has recently been dealt kind of a terrible blow by the world.
What I love is that each one of you are established writers in your own right. Stephanie, you are a journalist, a cultural critic. You've got your own independent comic book, which I love to death, which I can't talk enough about. More than one webcomic, actually. Danny, your skills in horror and speculative fiction, just on the point. Tochi, you just got nominated for NAACP Awards, so I'm just not about how talented all of you absolutely are. But one of the things that you all have in common, besides being very talented writers, is that you all love Marvel. Like true, core to the heart Marvel fans since you were kids. Each one of you got an email, you said yes, and then the editor was like, what character do you want to write about? What story do you want to tell? And that's really incredible, but it's got to be overwhelming. And in particular, for you, Stephanie, you chose one of our favorite characters, Monica Rambeau. I gotta know, how do you begin to know what story, how, and then, how do you get to that point where you say, I got this?
The moment I was told that we could pick whoever we wanted, I instantly knew that I wanted to write Monica Rambeau. I just prayed that nobody else had picked her. And thankfully, no one else did. From there, the story just came to me because, again, this is just something that I guess I had been training for all my life. All those nights reading Avengers comics and everything else paid off.
All right, so Tochi, let's get back to Domino. You wrote this amazing story called Good Luck Girl. Talk to me about why you decided to write about Domino and why this story.
Domino is really interesting to me as the prototypical tragic figure. And I immediately, when I thought of her and I thought of her power, I was like, the story immediately came to me. I really love characters who spin against the way that the world turns, right? There's that friction, and that to me is the root of conflict and drama. And I just, the stuff that Domino's dealing with is literally the stuff of Greek myth. And I was so fortunate that nobody else had jumped on a Domino story before then. I had the time of my life.
So one of my other favorite characters is Blade. Danny, talk to me a little bit about how you chose Blade, why you chose Blade, and honestly, why a bodega?
I mean, Blade was immediately they're like, oh, who do you want to pick? Steph was saying it just felt like that moment in time. Blade already fit so naturally in the world I grew up. My story takes place in my dad's old hood, Hunts Point in the Bronx. My dad is a lot where I got my Marvel love of, he was a big Iron Man fan, he would tell stories of them all playing in the playground and stuff. And fighting over who got to be who. So I was like, it was a natural fit, right? I had pitched both Blade and Killmonger in my first approach, as two characters that I adore. I'm drawn to characters with not just cool, but like swagger. And if any like two like dudes in the Marvel universe just have like swagger, you know, I love Luke Cage, but he's someone's uncle. I love him. He's cool, but he's uncle cool. Am I
mean,
wrong?
It's true. I'm not, this is not me saying you're incorrect. It's just, I'm never going to be able to look at Luke Cage the same again. So, Danny, you have not just one, but you have two stories in this book. You obviously got this amazing story that you have done about Blade, but you have this other story starring Storm, drawn by Aletha Martinez, and it's part of this very, very cool partnership with a Death Jam artist. So, talk to me a little bit about that story and how that came about.
Well, just starting on the Storm stuff, like it was such a cool kind of moment to collab with a musician on telling a story about kind of like why Storm is important to both of us, you know, and kind of where we both stood in terms of what matters when telling a story of hers, right? And I'm kind of taking, you know, the ideas that they have and making them both of ours, you know, in a really cool way. It was a story that kind of really hit hard emotionally for me when working on it, and then seeing like Alethia's art on it, which is just, I could stare at her Storm all day, and I did when I got the pages. You know, so that was like really just kind of awesome.
I truly believe everyone has a Marvel origin story. You know, and I'm going to toss this to Stephanie because I really love your origin story so much. I'm sorry that I keep picking on you, Stephanie, because when there is a grandmother involved, I'm just a sucker for grandmothers. I just am. You know, talk to me a little bit about not just like your earliest Marvel memory, but like what was it for you that drew you into comics?
All right, so my grandmother loves soap operas, and like any 90s baby, I spent a lot of time at my grandmother's house. So I watched a lot of soap operas. It was just always something going on weekly, daily, just this high drama. And of course, eventually I got, you know, invested into it. So I remember reading, I think it was West Coast Avengers. It reminded me of the mess that I got from soap operas. And it was in that moment, I was just like, okay, so we have these superpower folks, but there are also regular people who are just as messy as us, that human connection. And that was just something that just really, I don't know, like it just drew me in, because I'm like, yeah, they saved the day, but also, you know, they might be having an affair with the real estate agent as they visit their sister and brother-in-law. And I loved it.
For those of you who are listening, that is an actual storyline. That was not something that Stephanie just made up. God, I love comic books. Tochi, you're a civil rights lawyer who has turned into a writer. And so I kind of want to just talk to you, you know, as a prose writer, as someone who is in this space and has really done a lot of work within the civil rights space. You know, what does it mean for you to be part of this anthology? Because this is your first time, not just first time writing for Marvel, but this is your first time writing a comic.
Yeah, no, it's a dream come true. I've been a Marvel head since I was a kid. One of my first intros was through X-Men the Animated Series. Like I imagine a lot of 90s kids, and that was my intro to, you know, the Phoenix Saga, so many seminal storylines in the X universe. That was it for me. And I remember too, like back in the day, they would have all these huge, like Age of Apocalypse or Executioner's Song, these just ginormous, to the point where the scope was like Greek mythology. These ginormous storylines across like a dozen books or whatever. And I just remember being a kid, literally like running around scrambling to get like the issues of X Factor, X Force,
Uncanny X-Men and X-Men Volume 2 that comprised Executioner Song. So, and it was just like, it was thrilling. And of course I didn't have nearly enough money for that, but it like, I so remember that experience, and now sort of bringing it full circle and being able to like call myself a Marvel creator is like, it still hasn't completely sunk in. But like, for me, storytelling and narrative have always been a part of my life. And even in the legal space, so much of being, in the courtroom or trying to convince somebody via argument is telling a story. There's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end, there's a central conflict, and concision is key. Like, you don't want to be long-winded. You don't want to lose your listener or your reader's attention. And so that in many ways has been the engine for so much of my creative life.
So something that recently stood out to me is that this is one of the only books where it is mostly women and non-binary creators, unintentionally, that make up the cast. And it's not a woman's book, and it's a BIPOC book. So it's pretty cool, because like, Stephanie, your story has Natasha Bustos on pencils, Rochelle Rosenberg on colors. Danny, you've got Aletha Martinez in one of your stories. Like, for both of you, Danny and Stephanie, like, what was the experience like working with a team of majority women and non-binary folks?
It just feels like it's just about time. Because you know this, but others don't. I love comic deep dives. They are my favorite. I love the golden and silver age. And I know that I probably shouldn't, because there aren't too many Black characters from that part. But the storytelling, it's just something that has always appealed to me. So to be able to kind of take that love for that era and then be able to infuse it with, my take on it and bring it forward, I love it. Like, I love the fact that the way those stories have inspired me. Hopefully some, 10, 15 years from now, somebody might read that Monica Rambeau story and say, wow. So, again, these characters are amazing. They're strong. They're great. They're powerful. But I like seeing them at the supermarket. Like, what are they doing there?
With this book and virtually every project that I've been blessed to be on so far, I've gotten to have a really happy, proud cry, because in some way, each of us, not just me, but like all of us and my other, like, BIPOC homies, like, doing what they're doing now, we're all being the first in some way in every step we take. And that is both immensely cool and like immensely terrifying, right? Like, I'm gonna write my heart into a Blade story, Tochi being like, I'm gonna show people why they should love Domino, like that, like, this stuff is so big, and we're doing so many firsts. I've told this story once or twice, but back when I was working at the comic shop, I was on shift like the week that the first Miles book went on the shelf. Like the build up, everything was behind the register, and I remember this Black dad and his son coming in, and obviously I'm like hyped, so I just start telling them about it, and the kid is smiling, and like the dad started getting a bit emotional, and he just said straight up to his son, like, hey, you heard that? Like Spider-Man looks like you now, and I'm behind the register, like, it's over there, it's on the shelf.
Look, you're about to make me cry, Danny. Come on now.
And I just think about how, like, somebody is going to read Steph's story and see themselves in a way that they have never seen themselves in a comic before.
And I love that, because like, one of the things that I love, and one, like, I have to shout out John Ridley's story, speaking of Miles Morales in this book. It is, when I talk about like an economy of words, and then also telling this big story about exactly what you were talking about, that's so core to the character, that's so core to representation and belonging. This idea of seeing something written, seeing something that looks different and unique and is still, a representation of creativity, regardless of ethnicity, geographic region, and background. But I gotta say something though. I think what y'all have to all get shout outs for is each one of y'all wrote a script. And each one of y'all do not write short things. I mean, you do, Danny, because you write comics all the time, so I don't want to slight, but also
Oh,
like,
you've never seen my drafts before. I cut the dialogue then.
And so
Every one of my editors is like.
So this is the point. So what does for you, and I'm going to start with Tochi, because Tochi, you're the novelist. Like you are, that is all you have done to this point. How does writing a book differ from, I think Domino is like 8 pages. Like it's not 300. And they're pictures, which means there's less room for words.
I mean, it's funny because the pictures really help out. Like they do a lot of the heavy lifting. And, shout out to Ken Lashley, who Ken Lashley did the art for my story. What?
Yo, how'd you react when you heard that?
Yo, man, I bust out into tears. I had a Danny cry. I'd grown up with his character designs in my head, and I don't know. Anyway, now I'm starting to get emotional. But to answer the question, I think it's I'm starting from different places, right? So with a novel, oftentimes I'm dealing with multiple characters, or at least I'm going to tackle multiple characters. Whereas with Domino, it was just her. She was the focus. It was all about her. I mean, part of it too was, as much as I love words, I love concision. I love really getting to the point. You can read a sentence. It could be a single sentence in a 500-page book that perfectly encapsulates how you're feeling at a particular time. And it could be an 8-word sentence. And you're like, that's it. Like that right there. And that's a feeling that I absolutely live for. So, it was really fun making that jump. It also helped that I'd been reading comics my entire life. So I'd internalized so much of how stories are told there. But yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. And shout out to Ken for doing so much of the heavy lifting.
Yeah, but you make a good point. The thing I love about comic books, it is truly a team sport. It is a team effort, right? So I gotta go over to Steph though, because Steph, this is your first story for Marvel, but also I want to be very clear. Your artist is not in the United States. Your artist is in Spain. Stormbreaker, complete and utter, total badass, Natasha Bustos, is also incredible artist. Doing it, been a comic book fan entire life. What was it for you being able to bring this story to life? And how did that teamwork go? Because we've talked about your script. Your script was basically written within the first 24 hours of you realizing you were going to do this.
Yeah, 2 hours, because I was ready.
Bad.
You never have to get ready.
I got that email, and my famous words, bet, is what I said. And I got to work. And I mean, I don't want to make it same, but I just feel like it was just a moment that I've been training for, again, all my life, because if you follow me on Twitter, a lot of times I used to thread things, and I would take old stills from X-Men TAS and try to make a story out of a still shot. Now, I didn't have my pick, so I had to make the story work in a way that if someone saw it, they would get okay, yeah, this is happening. And I applied that to the Monica story. I had no idea that Natasha was going to be doing the art until after the fact. She does such an amazing job of giving that book an animated feel to it, but also like there's action. And it just so happened that my comic is of the story that I wrote, the script is like sort of like that. So it was just a match made in heaven. And I did cry actually, because 2 years ago, I went from talking about her from, a fan perspective to working with her. And it was just surreal to me.
Fun fact, Natasha uses herself as reference for Moon Girl. So if you've ever seen her, you've basically seen Moon Girl. It's adorable. Anyway, has also done Spider-Woman, like incredible, incredible, incredible artist. And I love that. I mean, Danny, this is your bread and butter. You went from, I'm going to write this, I love this is a thing, doing short stories, doing speculative fiction. You work in all of these different spaces. How does this shorter format, not the short story, differ for you when you have to kind of condense it down to 5 pages? Because this Blade Bodega story, pacing. Your pacing is so on point with the comedy and the fighting, because it wouldn't be a comic book unless there was some bang and pow and zoom and windows being smashed. How does it differ for you as you're approaching the anthology format?
It's the ability to think of a story and go like, cool, exactly how many beats are there? What do you need to have on the page, right? Like, I talk a lot about the difference between writing fictional prose and comics is algebra. You're solving for X on every page. I might have a word count, like say 7,000 words for a short story, but like no one's like, make sure that the is on the end of the page, so you turn it over and the next word is there, right? Like this is a different experience. And so like a lot of my comic process is like, I guess a little similar to what like say a novelist would see as like really hardcore outlining. Like I basically just magnify my outline until I add dialogue. Like I approach literally every opportunity like this is going to be the one time I ever touch that character. So what is the most important thing for me to have said I wrote about that character? And so I needed Blade to come in with a bang and like break some hearts because he's too strong and silent type. Like those were the things for me, like.
I mean, do you mean break hearts or steak hearts? Oh,
yes.
Sorry, I had to.
Yes. And it's literally just that constant solving for X. I take an approach where I'm always dialogue last, also, and this comes from, in case you can't tell, I'm mad wordy, and so I try to do as much work in the panel as possible, and then go back in and see what dialogue I need.
So thank you for this masterclass, Danny Lore. I appreciate you.
I get really excited about that topic in particular.
Yeah. I was like, what? To go write a comic now. Thank you. All right. So I know all of you have deadlines. I am very aware that you all have work to go do. Many of you, multiple deadlines within the next several days. But I want to thank each one of you for joining us today. I cannot wait for folks to read your stories. And for those of you at home, make sure you're picking up Marvel's Voices Legacy #1, February 24th, wherever you get your comic books. And as always, this is Marvel, your universe.